Hey everyone. So happy to be here. Love AxCon. So happy to be able to speak. My name is Donna Bungard. I am the Senior Accessibility Program Manager for the Marketing Department at Indeed. My pronouns are she, her. I am a mid-40s woman with long dark hair with a little blue peeking once in a while and bright red lipstick. Let's get going. Well, my clicker didn't want to click, so we'll just do it the old-fashioned way. What's a presentation without a technical difficulty? So, yes, I have all sorts of IAAP certifications. And if you look at my LinkedIn, I have certificates in alphabet soup after my name. But the truth is, I've been practicing disability inclusion and accessible best practices all of my life. I grew up in a household where I was the only non-disabled person. And I experienced the barriers, the financial obstructions, all of these aspects of life that, whether or not we want to think about, are an everyday part of the social impact of disability in our society. On top of having exposure to, my family's disabilities, meaning if I didn't want to have to do the chores alone, I made sure my sister, who was hard of hearing, could hear me, little things. On top of that, I remembered something putting this picture on the stack, and that is this picture was taken approximately 3 years before the first time they were going to try to code me as learning disabled. The special ed teacher turned to my mother and said, if we do this, she won't be allowed to take college preparation classes when she gets to high school. So 6 years after this picture, after the ADA was passed, I was able to be identified as learning disabled. I won't say what they categorized me at. For those of us identified as female at birth, especially in the late 80s and early 90s, some of the neurodiverse identifications were a little fuzzy. But the fact is, they were able to go ahead and set me up to be able to get the resources I needed once I got to college. I mentioned that, and I open our conversation with that because I want us to start thinking about and frame this as the systemic barriers faced by the disabled community. Because when we have systemic barriers, that means there are systemic solutions. And well, that means when we're talking about accessibility at scale, we're talking about iterative, systematic improvements that are going to break down barriers, which is why you're here. So let's get into it. First, we're going to redefine and rethink about how we talk about accessibility and approach it. We're going to make some friends, and then we're going to nurture those relationships and focus on being nimble and making a real impact. So, redefining and thinking about strategically. Anyone who's heard me speak or followed me on LinkedIn has heard me say this over and over lately. So that's why I say, I, quoted myself as shouting from a rooftop somewhere. Accessibility is the tactical arm of disability inclusion. It is how we're going to reach our goals. It is not our goals themselves. We keep talking about accessibility as that's the answer. That's a piece of it. It is a very important piece of it. But that's not what we're trying to accomplish. It's how we're going to do it. Why? Because accessibility as a goal is really elusive. To be 100% accessible or compliant, it is not sustainable over time. You have a cron job if you're on the technical side. You have a user error on a content side. You have a barrier that you absolutely need to go through and break down right away. But if we're looking at a checklist, it's only part of the story. So I think about an office I used to go to many years ago, and that doorknob was always sticky. I really hated that doorknob. I was able to get into my space and perform my work, and life went on. But it was awful to have that sticky feeling on my finger every time. We can have 100% checkbox compliant sites that are the user experience equivalent of that sticky doorknob. So though these compliance and these accessibility goals are vital to being inclusive, they are not the only piece, and they're not going to get us where we need to be. So let's switch around how we're going to talk about this beginning right from the start. If we reframe accessibility as how we're getting something done towards our goal of inclusive behaviors, we can start making more strategic goals that are measurable and scalable. And it doesn't matter if you're scaling to your small or a multinational, an international corporation. You can scale this to fit your needs to make sure you are making the most impact. We want to then, as I just said, sorry, I repeated, got ahead of myself, disability inclusion focused goals. So what might those look like? Maybe you want to increase the number of people who take a disability awareness training. I am a really big fan of that type of training, by the way. I see a lot of individuals who when they think about disability, they think their lived experience, they're thinking of their friend, their sibling, their child, their neighbor, but they're not necessarily understanding or have the vocabulary for a more inclusive experience. So to have that baseline knowledge is really powerful. So giving people vocabulary. I'm not going to go through every one of these in this much detail, but I'll talk through each one briefly. Maybe your goal here would be to improve the disability inclusion experience throughout the throughout the organization. Upskill your people. This is a goal we all have. Maybe this could be one of your more goals about inclusive natures. And therefore, by the way, that would translate to them creating more accessible work. Maybe you want to increase disability representation, or make sure that all of your forums, whether they be hiring or events or whatnot, ask everybody, what are your access needs? Everyone has access needs. It's a universal design principle that will give individuals the ability to describe exactly what they need to be successful. Maybe this is a technical challenge for your organization, and you need to just track, year over year, month over month, whatever your time frame is, a downward trajectory of remediation in tickets. And then we want to improve results. Maybe you want to improve results from your user testing with disabled participants. Any of these are goals that can scale regardless of your size or your sphere of influence. Or maybe, you're going to want to apply it to your team and then spread it out. Again, sphere of influence. But these are some really great goals. But we're not going to just stop at setting these goals, because to make it really solid, we don't want just goals. We want a framework. We want to build the scaffolding from which we'll build this program that's going to reach the far edges of the universe here. So from these goals, identify what are your pillars. What is the primary pillars for your team based on those goals? Let's pull out themes based on my examples. Education and awareness. We talked about the awareness training. We talked about upskilling individuals. Representation and inclusion. We talked about asking everyone their access needs and better representation in our media. We talked about technical conformance, that traditional alley piece with the downward trajectory of tickets and the user testing. Now we've taken what we're thinking about and broken them out of specifics and created pillars. And these will be what you can stand your program up upon. So here we are. We have pillars, we have themes, we have things that can work regardless where you're standing. And now it's time to build this from the ground up based on those pillars, based on what we're learning. Now, I love my pie in the sky goals. I love them so much, but at this point, it's not the time for them. Here we need to understand where we are, not where we wish we were, and build upon those pillars from where we are. And we'll get to where we wish we were. And that's okay if you're not there yet. We're talking about setting up a framework that's going to include long-term progress, not necessarily all low, this isn't going to be all low-hanging fruit. We're talking about a framework for all the long term. So if you're not there, that's fine. But let's be realistic about exactly where you are right now when you're looking at your pillars. What, or how, I should say, can we translate these pillars into systematic improvements? Maybe you want to look at learning opportunities, mentorship programs, or maybe we want to meet with teams and meet teams where they are in terms of baking it into existing processes. Maybe we want to ask employee resource groups for input and insights, for perspectives that, not everyone can understand every user experience. So invite more people to just share theirs if they're comfortable. And an employee resource group is a great place to ask. Maybe you want to talk with teams or just share your insights on how to put certain things into practice. Maybe you want to review your processes that you have for reviewing tests, QA and testing, and really assess what those accessibility tickets are. Are you finding a theme? Because maybe if you're finding the same theme over and over here under technical conformance, it'll go back to education and awareness and scream about a learning opportunity for a segment of your organization. These pillars are going to interconnect and build upon each other. And these are just examples of how we can take these pillars, these themes from those specific goals into systemic change. But you're not going to do this alone. Your team isn't going to do it alone. If you're a team of one in an organization of 50, or if you're a team of 30 in a larger organization, it doesn't matter. Your team can't do it alone. There's always more to be done. Which brings us to our landscapes and alignment. First, we got to assess, where are we? What is our culture? What are our teams divided out with? Sometimes it's just taking the organizational map of your organization. That was a little repetitive. Organizational map and studying it a bit, and then asking yourself, what teams are facing the same challenges as your team? Maybe your team is producing a lot of PDFs. Looking around, you can probably guess, oh, maybe HR is having to produce a lot. Maybe sales is having to do a lot. Maybe this, maybe that. Start asking who might have the same challenges. Start thinking about resources. What resources do you have and what do you need? And what resources might these other groups have that you just don't have, access to or vision into their existence? And then really just sit back and think, who can I help? Who might benefit from my support? Because asking these questions is going to help you build cross-functional teams that will lead back to those strategic pieces we want to work on. So now is time to start introducing yourself and asking questions. How do we do this? Well, I love Slack. I appreciate not everybody does, respect that, but that's always the first place I go. If I find something on an organizational chart of, oh, that's a great thing. Or maybe I saw something that came up and it's like, I think we can probably improve that. First thing I do is I figure out where the contact is. I pull them up on Slack. I take a look at, well, firstly, their time zone to make sure I'm slacking at an appropriate time, their time zone, what department they're in, what their role is. And I cater to the, hey, I saw this in this channel. Is that something you'd want to collaborate on? I send a lot of these notes. And it's a great way to break down silos, get to know everybody in your organization, and start to really feel who has resources they can give you and who you can reach back out to. A lot of teams have lunch and learns. Who has maybe presented on this topic? Who can you reach out to and talk to and learn more from? Maybe there's a mutual resource, maybe they have resources, or maybe there's a call for resources that could benefit you both. Again, those internal or employee resource groups, I absolutely adore them. Just having the conversation sometimes is enough. And then again, looking for volunteer opportunities. Who, maybe they're not on your team. Maybe it's not your department, but do they need a hand? Is this something that's going to be inclusion focused that they're working on that you can lean in and support them? Because really the team success is going to be yours. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But first, I want to just shout out to the more introverted types, because I'm rather extroverted, if you can't tell by the 4 go-tos I just said. And I'll just be out there and saying, hey, have you met me? But that's not everybody's style. And I want to empower everyone to build these cross-functional teams. So first of all, do some homework. Again, go to those organizational charts, but also maybe look through past presentations, email newsletters, look around, figure out who it is, what their roles are. Instead of the informal, hey, how you doing on Slack, maybe just look around your organization a little bit deeper. And then prepare some questions so you feel confident and comfortable going into these. Make sure you're showing the genuine interest in their work. Ask for an introduction. None of us do this alone. You know what? Maybe there's somebody you're already comfortable with on your team, and you can say, hey, do you know so-and-so over in this other department? I was really interested in something they said on the lunch and learn. Maybe you can give me an introduction. I know this is very basic, but sometimes it's important to hear this. And then again, play to your strengths. If you are somebody who's a deep listener, listen, show interest, and make sure you're talking about them. You're listening to them and taking in and encouraging them to talk to you. What I'm talking about here to build these cross-functional teams is an authentic interest and investment in someone else's success. This means sometimes I'm recommending that in the spirit of disability inclusion in your pillars that you're working towards, you might be having to put another team's priority at least as equal as yours, and give it that much energy. Because if you're working in a cross-functional team and it's working towards your pillar, you're still showing your team's value. You're still showing progress. You are still working against your KPIs, OKRs, whatever metric system you use to show your success. You're still working towards them because you've set these strategic pillars based on disability inclusion, and you're not just looking at your checklist in front of you of needs. So you're able to work in this authentic way. And you get to really meet remarkable humans throughout your organization who have shared interests and desires to succeed and learn new perspectives. And you can learn as well. This is not a one-way street. This is a team effort. And I love this quote from Adam Grant. It's, if we create networks with the sole intention of getting something, we won't succeed. We can't pursue the benefits of networks. The benefits ensue from investments in meaningful activities and relationships. So all of this part is what I'm saying is to build these cross-functional teams. We need to authentically care about how the group is doing. Apply that back to our strategy to move forward disability inclusive goals that are going to make impact. And when we're working on these teams, we have to be patient. Everyone's going to have conflicting priorities at some point. It's the nature of the beast. So find ways to work together where your teammates are. Find out where they are and work with that. And if it can't get done this month, maybe it's not mission critical. Maybe that's okay. Maybe, all right, can we just do this piece this week and everything else we can do next month? Because perfection is the enemy of progress. That's why the beautiful saying, progress over perfection, it's what we need to work towards. And doing that means we have to sometimes meet people where they are. So when we're thinking about our cross-functional teams and we're authentically wanting others to succeed, ask yourself 3 things. Is there naturally occurring synergy? Because that's going to be easy. Those are going to be your low-hanging fruit. Okay, these 3 teams all work on PDFs. Let's create a team to drive this home. Or let me and my team, we specialize in creating trainings for this. Let us create the trainings, but these teams will help us distribute it for visibility and for a wider net. Let's take a closer look at the areas where maybe there isn't an alignment of those goals, of that synergy, but maybe you both need the same types of things. Is there a shared tool? Is there a shared approach? Where is the overlap? Because even if it's not a one-to-one, it's still worth working together on that team to make progress, even if you're going to have to fork off at some point. And then is there a way to advance maybe their goals that's going to lift the organization up? I love the quote, rising tide lifts all boats. Again, helping them will still show value as you're working towards these more strategic goals and less tactical approaches. And part of that is just going to come down to nurturing those relationships. Somebody isn't ready to work with you yet. Great, meet for coffee for 20 minutes. I love Friday mornings, occasionally just setting up a 20-minute, I have my coffee, they have their coffee. Talk about, hey, where are you in this stuff? Are you ready for support? Or, hey, I need some support here. I'm ready to accept your help or collaborate on something. I love those. Share information, especially in larger teams and larger groups. It's easy, especially when you have hybrid or remote teams. It's easy for people to lose track of all the details. So go ahead and keep just a very transparent communication going. Ask for feedback. Even on this deck, I reached out to somebody and said, look, I know you're glorious at making our executives look really, really good. Can you look at this one slide? It was the one of me, 10-year-old me at the beginning, where I said this picture was taken before the educational barriers were there and then removed. I asked somebody, I asked for feedback on that. It wasn't accessibility exactly, but the point is we have those connections and we all have different skills. And this is an accessibility or disability inclusion presentation. So therefore, his skills lent to this beautifully. And then again, respecting space. If they can't come back to it, that doesn't mean the relationship is awful. It does not mean, well, we're not getting this done right now. I'm so frustrated. No one's paying attention. They are paying attention. They just can't act at that moment. And that's okay. We're going to respect their space. We will get back to that. So let's pull this together. Been trying to pull it together a little bit as we go, but when we go back to our pillars, to our strategies that we've identified, now that we've talked to our teams, we might find that our priorities have shifted. There's an amazing opportunity over here. I get to work with 3 other teams. It means that this is going to have a wider distribution, a better result. Go team. That maybe some of your strategies have changed that fit under that pillar. That's okay. This is going to be an evolution. Technology moves at the speed of data. Our reality as we understand it online now is not going to be the same. With or without artificial intelligence, it would still not be the same down the line. So our work is supposed to evolve with us as we learn, as we collaborate, as we move forward. So we're going to rethink those goals, the strategic goals we've set. And after that, we'll develop a roadmap, but I strongly, strongly suggest you build in enough room to be nimble. Alone or in collaboration, something's going to change. It could be your perspective, learning something new. It could be a situation outside of your control. There's a million variables. We live in a world of variables. There's millions of them. So be nimble. Don't be afraid to just keep changing and being fluid to meet the needs where they are going to be the most impactful. And rely on these friends, rely on these cross-functional teams to move things forward. So let's think about what we've done. At this point now, we've redefined accessibility and defined goals based on the needs of the larger org through the exploration and discovery you've done, creating these cross-functional teams. You're nurturing your relationships as you found allies, and some you're going to work with right away, and some you might not come back to for 6 months, and that's good. And you're going to give yourself a rough plan. And that plan is going to be focused on impact. Systematic impact. Yeah, I kind of got ahead of myself. No matter the size of your team or organization, you have the ability to work cross-functionally, break down silos, and have greater impact. We're here to make a difference. When we're working in disability inclusion, when these are our goals, we have to understand in some ways we're all a little bit of a digital activist, maybe some of us more than a little. So we have to make impacts and change the systems that create the barriers. And that's how we're all going to empower ourselves, or each other, and change what the status quo is. So with that, Q&A.
First, thank you very much, Donna, for the presentation. I will tell you, I'm going to mention a couple of comments in the chat. I mentioned at the beginning that Donna will get this copy of the chat, but Donna, I just wanted to make sure you heard some of the comments some of the participants were making. Jen mentioned it. This has been incredible, total validating, encouraging, empowering, and exactly what I needed at this exact moment in time. So thank you for that. Also, Gabriel mentioned this is a great introduction on the ways to connect and the reasons why it's so important to do so. And then we also had another comment earlier in the comment from Kim of this bottom-up approach would work really well in my environment where folks have a lot of ideas on what to do. Then you can bucket them and map them up to pillars and have those pillars start. So just fantastic in the participants, just the comments that we saw, just overwhelming of thank you, Donna, for this presentation. It really helped a lot of our participants. So I've got a couple questions here, and actually the two types of questions, and we've got more coming in, are really around two specific topics. The one is at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned disability awareness training. We have a question of just, can you give us a more specific example of what you might include in a disability training? Is it talking about different disability types and barriers that might, or what might be faced with people with disabilities? Is there resources that you would say, hey, this is a good place to start for someone who is trying to create that disability awareness training?
That's a fantastic question. And truth be told, a huge passion of mine. When I have been working on one internally, and parts of it have been internally released. The first thing I always do is talk about the social impact. I want everyone to understand why what we're doing matters. I want them to understand the pay gap, the education gap, the role that intersectionality plays. I in the deck, or sorry, in the training, I reference it as disabled because intersectionality plays a huge, huge part on the lived experience of individuals. So I talk a lot about the social impact of what disability, those barriers are from the social, from the understanding that this is a whole community. This is not individuals. This is a whole community. This is parents and spouses and siblings and children. This is everybody who loves and is a part of that group. It is a bunch of neurodivergent individuals who may not identify as disabled, or maybe just don't feel that they are disabled enough to count. There's a whole huge group, and understanding the social impact of those barriers and the wage and age and the ability to thrive. We're not talking sometimes survive, but I'm talking about thrive. Surviving's not enough. I always start there. And then, yes, I do talk about different disabilities. I usually break them down into 6 different categories: visual, audio, mobility, cognitive, which, because I am in the US and I follow the ADA, neurodivergence is counted under cognitive, but I do respect those who don't identify. Emotional and intellectual. And I talk about some of the ways it can present, with the understanding that this is neither an exhaustive list, nor is it a story of every lived experience. But let's have the conversation. Let's not be afraid of the words. Let's just be human and learn from each other, and learn how to not only build accessible things, but build inclusive, and celebrate each other, and celebrate what everybody has to bring to the table. It's about the mutual meeting of needs. It's not that one person is a great person for this or that or what. It's a mutual meeting of needs, and it's helping connect the right talent in our world, and indeed the right talent to the right employers, and meeting everyone where they are to celebrate them and breaking down those barriers.
Yeah, it's interesting also that you point that out, Donna, about meeting an employer's needs with an individual. My daughter, I have 4 kids, and my middle daughter, Grace, has ADHD and dyslexia. And I think it was very interesting for me to hear when she started looking at her dyslexia as a competitive advantage in the
Absolutely.
marketplace, not a disability, because she looks at something differently than anybody else does because of her dyslexia. And so, Donna, it's your point of helping people realize the positive market impacts they can make because of their experiences that other people don't have, right? You shared a part of your life, and it's like you have experiences that you share with others can give them a perspective that nobody else would have. And I think you brought that up, and your presentation, I think, showed that woven throughout, right? About your life experiences and help frame how you built a network, right? And importance of that build network. So part of the second question gets into some of those networking opportunities that you talked about, and especially around employee resource groups.
Mhm.
And the concern and I'll say a concern because just a couple of the participants mentioned it. If the only individuals internally willing to lead those groups is, and we'll talk about it two ways. First, what if the person willing to lead that charge is non-disabled? What kind of barriers and challenges might they have in implementing a group? How would you help an individual who might not have that experience push forward that group, or say, I'm interested in this topic because, and get others on board with it?
That is a beautiful question. Allyship is vital. This comes back down to the, rising tide. None of us do it alone.
Mhm.
If somebody's interested, I would first, well, obviously see if there's anything there. If there's nothing there, and you know that some of your coworkers do identify with a disability, I'd maybe start asking them how do they feel about it? Because every company culture is different.
Mhm.
And how your group is going to interpret the behaviors will depend on that culture.
Mhm.
So I'm not trying to skirt the answer, but I'm saying I would first start asking people within your groups, within your circles, how do I get this started? Like, not asking how to get started, but how would it be received if I got this started?
Mhm.
I want to be the organizational person who raises everybody else's voice. And that is the approach. That is the one thing I'm not saying depends on culture. The idea is you're amplifying others' voices. It's not going to be about yours at that point. It's going to be about amplifying and celebrating. And also leading with empathy and vulnerability.
Mhm.
And sometimes that vulnerability is, I don't know.
Yep.
Someone I loved very much many years ago had lost the ability to use words in the way he had previously, and he was very frustrated. So I turned to him one day. I'm like, look, you need to vent. I'm not going to get it all,
Yep.
but I'm here. I'm paying attention. I'm listening. Go for it. And I caught maybe 10% if I'm lucky. It's probably really more like 5. But he was so grateful that I was there and I was listening and I was trying. And eventually we worked out what he meant.
Yep.
It didn't happen the first time. But I had to be blunt and transparent and vulnerable that I'm scared that I'm not going to get everything, but I'm in it. I'm here. I'm here to listen to you. I'm here for your voice. Bring it at me.
Yep.
And that's what it comes down to.
So the inverse was also talked about. The inverse was talked about is sometimes you have a group that's being driven by individuals with disabilities, and it's hard to dedicate the time. It's hard finding the energy because you have a lot going on.
Absolutely.
How do we make the group more inclusive so it isn't just people with disabilities driving it? Do you have ideas of, and I will tell you one thing that immediately hits as I ask this question was your example about your presentation of finding someone and saying, hey, can you look at this? And it wasn't about disabilities, but it was, this is your forte. This is your strength. Can I utilize it to help get my message across? And that individual was said, of course you can, right? Of course I would love to help you with that. I think that's a great example of how we can leverage people's strengths and say, I want you for your strength, and you're going to learn something on the journey. Is there other thoughts that you have that we can maybe engage people with?
Absolutely. 26% of the US and Canada each approximately identify of adults identify with the disability. Recent statistics I read was average is 4 to 5, it's less than 5%. It's 4%, I think, disclose at work. So maybe part of it is that comes down to that feeling of, am I disabled enough? That is a very big question that's asked and debated among a lot of individuals. I mean, I'm definitely got identify with some neurodiversity. I don't have specific access needs other than, for it to stop snowing in New Hampshire in March. No, I don't have, seriously, bad joke. My point is, I don't have access needs. So am I disabled enough to count as that, of that? So breaking down some of the, hey, we want you, we want your skills, we want your voices. We don't care if you identify as somebody with a profound or however you want to say it. Everybody identifies. Profound disability is something controversial with some in groups. Others prefer me to say it. You don't identify as someone who is disabled and has access needs. Therefore, you may or may not feel comfortable, but I want your voice too, because your perspective is different. Your perspective, your dyslexia may be that competitive advantage. Maybe your that pattern recognition is off the charts. And I need that skill. And just talking to people and being really vulnerable. And as you can see from this, that me answering the question, also don't be afraid to get it wrong and apologize.
Yeah.
We're not going to get it right. Everybody has something that means something to them. There are certain things that mean something to me that won't mean things to others. And I'm going to do my best at everything, and I'm not going to get it 100% right. But when you realize you don't, correct yourself and move on. That's another key part of these groups, is that acknowledgement of, oops, okay, I've learned, I'm moving on.
I love that point, Donna, because it's such a powerful point of don't worry about being wrong, learning from your mistakes. And if you're genuinely sorry when you make a mistake and say, and I've had this with friends with disabilities of I've used terminology that they were not comfortable with, and they corrected me. And the first words out of my mouth is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that to come around across the way it did. Thank you for helping me understand where you're at and where you're from, and I'll make sure I do that going forward. And so I think that is such an important part, is we use it as a learning experience for one another and not a barrier for one another. That's fantastic. One individual asks us, they're talking about they hold a position that's not senior enough to participate in their office's working group. Do you have advice on how to work at a smaller level, more micro level, to make a difference? Any thoughts with that?
Absolutely. Take a look around and maybe at your materials. I'm not sure what your skill sets are. So, but look for opportunities to volunteer. Usually if sometimes it's for internal things, but sometimes I'm looking through the website and I'm noticing I don't like this because I feel it's exclusionary that way. Or is that training that we all just took really? Because most of these trainings have feedback forms. Most web teams want to know if, maybe that picture overlapped that image because of typo, something very, very simple that can be missed. Maybe you'll be the person who catches it. Maybe you'll be that. So do that. Respond to forums, and then go out and do things even outside of work that are going to help you grow within your position. So maybe it's take a course. I'm at XCon, so, I do happen to know there are some classes out there. But seriously, maybe go take a course. Maybe learn sign. I'm over here watching our glorious interpreters here. And, maybe learn that. And maybe look for other things outside of your immediate sphere to grow skills that you will further along the line be able to apply and bring to the table.
I want to go back to one comment that you made in your presentation, and then if you don't mind elaborating on it a little more. It was your slide at which you talked about the water raises all boats. As an accessibility advocate, as an accessibility a person who feels strong about, I know a lot of times we can get frustrated
Yes.
that we're not making any progress, right? We're not making enough progress. Can you go back to the comment that you made of progress versus perfection and how it helped you many times? Because I could be wrong. I probably, I'm assuming I'm not, but it sounds like it's something that you've leaned on in your life to say, hey, I am making progress. It's not from 0 to 100. Can you talk a little bit about and give us advice on how we can lean on that progress versus perfection and take more joy in what we're doing as we're moving this forward?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. Definitely take joy. Absolutely. It's, yeah, I actually, Meryl Evans, was talking to me one time, and she's like, yeah, progress over perfection. I have the t-shirt. And I said, okay, where's the link? I'm buying that. And I do actually, I have it upstairs, and it's progress over perfection. We're never going to be perfect. We're never going to get there. If we are activists, I mean, honestly, if we think about the disability rights movement, it started in the 1970s.
Yeah.
This is a slow moving boat, and that's okay. Our mediums have expanded. In the 1970s, they weren't going to worry about if, is my cell phone going to have, no,
Yeah.
Kidding me? I saw the car phones back then. They weighed more than my dog. Our point is, it's going to be a slow moving boat, but everything you do, even if you impact one person's life, that can have a chain effect. And right now, when in this session, we're talking about systems. So you're not impacting one person's life.
Yep.
You might be impacting 100 people, but that 100 people will grow out. If you're doing an education course, you're going to impact, say, 500 people take that training you're making inside. Those 500 people are talking to other people, building it into their work, and it's going to grow out exponentially. You know what? Barriers and systems that create barriers, they work because they work against us, but they
Yep.
work or they function because of that ripple effect. If we're changing the systems, we have that same ripple effect, and we're not always going to be able to see all of the outcomes. But if we know we're making progress to the goal, we know we're creating that ripple. We know we're creating a positive experience that's going to impact real lives at the end of the day. And it's the humans that we need to worry about. So don't get discouraged. It is going to take time.
Yep.
It's not all rainbows and fun, but it's okay that it takes time. Just breathe. Remember you're making progress and that you're helping more barriers be taken down. And that's going to help people 2 weeks down the line, 5 years down the line, 30 years more down the line.
So we got a couple seconds, and so I wanted to ask you one quick question and then let you close. The one quick question is, a couple people in the chat has said if they would like to continue this conversation with you outside of AxCon, is there ways that they can meet up with you, like LinkedIn or Twitter or any of those kinds of channels?
Yes, absolutely. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think I'm Donna Bungard. I don't think I'm D Bungard. I apologize. I should have known that before coming here, but
Yeah, no worries.
I, of course, am blanking. But truth be told, Bungard is not a particularly popular last name. So go for it. Look me up. Yeah, and I'm happy to keep the conversation going. You can tag me with a question. I love all of this. I want to be here for the community because we all need each other.
Well, and you alluded it in your conversations, Donna, even this conversation today that we've had. One thing I think anyone should be able to see is that the disability advocate community is a giving community. And if we know something, we'll want to share it, right? So please
Absolutely.
reach out. And finally, any last words for the team to give before we go on our way today?
Just keep in mind that you're empowered. You're empowered to change systems, and systems change lives. You've got this. We all do. And just keep focused on those pillars and building yourself something that you can stand on and be proud of, and will make impact, hopefully, around the globe.
And one thing I will say to the audience before we move on our merry way, if you're working on it and you're frustrated, I would encourage you to bookmark Donna's talk to use as a pep talk anytime you need it. Donna, you gave us a lot of great actionable items, and I appreciate that. And I know a lot of the participants appreciate it just from the conversation you've had on the chat. So thank you very much, Donna. I appreciate your time, your experience that you've given us. Appreciate everybody on this session. We've got a little more of AxeCon left. I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions you have. And like I said, we'll make sure we get this chat and these questions to Donna afterwards so she can follow up on some of them. And again, I appreciate everybody sharing the ideas today. With that, I'm going to wish you the very best and have a great day.
Thank you.